The house was a postcard, a perfect diorama of a quintessential Christmas. Snow dusted the manicured lawn and clung to the boughs of the pine trees that lined the driveway. Inside, the air was warm with the scent of cinnamon and roasting turkey. A fire crackled in the hearth, casting a soft, dancing light on the faces of her family. To anyone else, it would have been a scene of pure, effortless joy. But to Emily, it felt like a stage, and she was an unscripted extra. She watched from the doorway as her younger brother, Alex, held court in the center of the living room. He was a vision in his crisp dress uniform, a hero home from deployment. Their parents, David and Carol, were a constellation of pride, orbiting him, their faces lit with an almost blinding adoration. They spoke of his bravery, his commendations, and the bright future that awaited him. Each word was a brick in a wall that had stood between Emily and her family for as long as she could remember. Alex was the golden child, the one who had followed the right path. He'd joined the military, a noble and respectable career in their eyes. Emily, on the other hand, had left a steady, six-figure job in marketing 2 years ago to pursue her passion as a full-time artist. Her parents had been heartbroken, their disappointment a thick, silent presence in every conversation. They had never stopped reminding her that she was taking an irresponsible, selfish risk. Her heartbreak was a quiet ache, a dull background hum to her life. The dinner bell rang, and they gathered around the mahogany table. As they ate, the conversation revolved, as always, around Alex. The talk of deployments gave way to plans for his future, a master's degree, a high-level corporate job, a comfortable life. Emily ate in silence, a knot of quiet loneliness tightening in her stomach. She had always felt like an asterisk to their narrative, a footnote in their grand story of success. Then, her father stood, a champagne flute in his hand. "I want to make a toast," he said, his voice thick with emotion. He looked at Alex, a father's pride shining in his eyes. "To my son. The one who has made us prouder than we could have ever imagined. The one who has proven that our legacy will be one of honor and discipline." Emily felt a familiar pang. She just wanted to get through the night, to get home and back to her canvas, the one place where she didn't feel invisible. But her father wasn't finished. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small, velvet box. Emily's heart stopped. She knew that box. It was a family heirloom, passed down through generations. But more than that, it was a secret between her and her grandfather. On her 18th birthday, just before he passed away, her grandfather had taken her aside. He had shown her the watch, a beautiful antique timepiece, with a tarnished silver face and a worn leather strap. "Your father and I, we're different, little one," he had said, his voice a low, raspy whisper. "He sees the world in numbers and titles. But I see it in colors. I see it in you. This watch belonged to my father, an artist who never had the chance to follow his dreams. I want you to have it. On your 30th birthday. It's a promise between us. A symbol of your spirit." The promise was a sacred thing. It was the one piece of their family's history that was hers alone, a quiet, beautiful betrayal of her parents' worldview. It was a secret she had carried for 12 years, a beacon of hope she held on to whenever their disappointment felt too heavy. And now, her father opened the box and held the watch out to Alex. "Son, this watch has been in our family for 5 generations, he said, his voice cracking with emotion. "It was passed from father to son, but your grandfather wanted you to have it now. For your courage, your sacrifice, and for making us so proud." The room erupted in applause and emotional murmurs. Alex, his face a mix of surprise and gratitude, accepted the watch. "Dad, I don't know what to say. This is incredible." Emily's world went silent. The clinking of glasses, the hum of conversation, the crackling of the fire, it all faded into a dull roar. The betrayal was not in the giving of the watch. It was in the broken promise. They had known. Her parents had known about the promise to her. They had known about her grandfather's last wish. And they had chosen to ignore it. They had rewritten her story, erasing her from the legacy that was meant to be hers. She stood from the table, a sudden, blinding rage replacing the familiar ache. Her mother called out, "Emily? Are you okay?" She didn't answer. She just walked out of the room, leaving the perfect postcard behind. The snow felt cold and clean against her hot face as she got into her car. She didn't look back. There would be no more quiet loneliness, no more invisible tears. Just a quiet, furious storm brewing inside of her. This wasn't just a family argument. This was a war. And she was finally ready to fight. Emily's car was a cocoon of cold fury as she drove away from the house. She left the meticulously decorated porch, the perfect Christmas scene, and the family she had just watched rewrite her life. She didn't answer her phone when it buzzed with her mother's worried calls, or when a text from her father arrived, terse and dismissive. What was that? Don't be so dramatic. She was past drama. She was in a different emotional landscape altogether, one of cold, calculated silence. For the next 6 months, she was a ghost. She changed her phone number, blocked her family on social media, and moved to a small, isolated studio apartment. She refused to open any of their letters, letting them pile up like silent accusations. Her revenge wasn't loud or explosive. It was a quiet, determined act of living her life on her own terms, a life where they no longer existed. This was her protest, the one thing they had never valued about her, her ability to disappear and create a world all her own. Her art became her sanctuary and her weapon. She stopped working on her usual landscapes and portraits and began a new series. The first canvas was a dark, brooding piece featuring a broken glass ornament on a snow-dusted ground. The title was a simple, stark phrase, "Broken Promise." The next was a portrait of a stoic-faced man, his eyes a mix of pride and a desperate, unacknowledged fear. She called it The Judge. The paintings were raw, visceral, and filled with a universal sorrow that resonated with a wide audience. They were not just about her family. They were about the universal pain of unfulfilled dreams and the silent betrayals that occur in the spaces between words. She started an online gallery and posted her work under a pseudonym, E. Thorne. The art became a sensation. People saw their own family struggles in her work, their own quiet heartbreaks. Her online following grew, and she sold prints to collectors all over the country. The fame was surreal. She went from being an unseen artist to a viral phenomenon. One morning, she received an email from a prestigious gallery in New York, inviting her to hold a solo exhibition. They had discovered her work online, and were captivated by its emotional depth. Emily accepted. The gallery was a beautiful, stark white space in the heart of the city. Her paintings, now framed and lit by spotlights, looked even more powerful. There was The Soldier's Gift, a heart-wrenching painting of a young man holding a gilded watch, his face a complex mixture of guilt and misplaced gratitude. There was The Dinner, a portrait of a family laughing, their faces illuminated by candlelight, while a lone figure stood in the shadows, their face a blurred, indistinct smear. The opening night was a blur of people, conversation, and flashing cameras. Emily, wearing a simple black dress, stood in the background, watching as critics and collectors discussed her work. The art that had come from her deepest pain was now a public spectacle, a quiet, effective form of revenge. Then, she saw them. Her parents, David and Carol, and her brother, Alex. They were standing in front of her piece, The Judge. She hadn't invited them, of course. They must have seen the article about the exhibition online, and, for some reason, had been drawn to the artist's name, E. Thorne. They didn't know it was her. They were simply intrigued by the emotionally charged art that so eerily mirrored their own family life. Her mother's eyes were filled with tears as she stared at the painting. "It's so sad," she whispered to her father. "It's like they knew us." Her father stood with his hands in his pockets, his stoicism finally cracking. He looked at the details of the painting, the way the father's eyes were just a little too distant, the way the mother's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. He saw himself and Carol, stripped bare of their perfect family facade. Alex, meanwhile, had found the soldier's gift. He stood staring at it, his face a mask of profound sadness. He knew that watch. He had worn it every day since that Christmas. He finally understood the gravity of his sister's absence. Then, her mother's eyes landed on a small plaque near one of the portraits. It listed the artist's full name, Emily Thorne. Her mother's hand flew to her mouth, a silent gasp. Her father's gaze shot to the plaque, and he, too, went pale. They turned, their eyes sweeping the room, frantic with a devastating understanding. Their eyes landed on Emily. She didn't flinch. She just stared back, her face a cool mask of triumph and hurt. The art was her voice, her truth, and she had forced them to listen. The revenge wasn't just about showing them her success. It was about showing them the depth of their betrayal. In that moment, surrounded by her art, she was no longer a shadow. She was a light, and they were finally standing in her glare. The gallery air, once a buzz of professional admiration, now felt thick with unspoken grief. Emily's parents and brother stood before her, their perfect, polished facades crumbling. Her father, a man who had always prided himself on his unwavering composure, looked a decade older. Her mother's face was a mask of devastated understanding. Alex, the golden boy, looked like a child again, his posture slumped, the weight of the world on his shoulders. Her mother was the first to speak, her voice trembling. "Emily, why?" she whispered, her eyes fixed on the painting of the family dinner, the lone figure a stark indictment. "Why didn't you just tell us?" "Tell you what?" Emily's voice was sharp, a blade of hurt. "That I was sad. That I was hurt. I told you my whole life. I showed you. But you never saw me. You only saw Alex, the one who made you proud." Her father's jaw was tight. "That's not fair. We always loved you, Emily. We wanted to protect you from what happened to your grandfather. You used his life as a cautionary tale to bury mine," she shot back, the years of pain finally finding a voice. "You didn't protect me. You betrayed me. You broke his promise to me. You stole my legacy." Alex stepped forward, his eyes full of a raw, unmasked guilt. "Emily, I knew. I knew about the watch. I heard Grandpa tell you about it that day. I didn't know how to say no. I'm sorry." The words were not an excuse, but a confession. He had been a victim of their parents' expectations, too, forced into a mold of perfection he never wanted. The anger Emily had felt toward him for so long began to dissolve, replaced by a profound, heartbreaking sadness for the brother who had carried his own silent burden. The family, once a well-oiled machine of polite appearances, was a wreck of emotions. The betrayal was no longer just Emily's, it belonged to all of them. Her parents' fear, Alex's guilt, and Emily's rage had all come to a head. The pain was out in the open, and in its wake, an opportunity for forgiveness, if they were brave enough to take it. The final Christmas was a quiet affair. The house was no longer a perfect postcard, it felt like a home again, worn and imperfect. The tree was lit, but the mood was somber, introspective. Emily had agreed to come, but on her own terms. She didn't expect an apology, and they didn't offer one in a formal way. Instead, her father came to her with the watch in its velvet box. He didn't speak. He just placed it in her hand. It was a silent act of contrition, a broken promise finally mended. Later, she and Alex sat by the fire, talking for hours. They spoke of the pressure, the expectations, the way their parents' love had felt like a cage. They laughed, they cried, and they finally saw each other for who they truly were, not rivals, but two people who had survived the same storm. Their forgiveness wasn't just a word. It was a new, unbreakable bond forged in shared pain. The watch was a symbol, but their reconciliation was the true gift. The last Christmas was not about a perfect family. It was about a family that was finally learning to be honest. The empty chair from that Christmas past was no longer a symbol of her absence, but a reminder of the quiet courage it took to walk away and return on her own terms. The revenge had not been about making them suffer, but about forcing them to see. And in seeing her, they had finally begun to see themselves. The revenge had led to healing, and the heartbreak had given birth to a new kind of love. The family had a long way to go, but for the first time, they were walking the path together. If you found yourself moved by Emily's journey from betrayal to forgiveness, please consider supporting this kind of storytelling. Like this video and subscribe to our channel to see more stories that explore the complex and powerful emotions of family, love, and second chances. Your support helps us create more narratives that resonate with you.